Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by onX. So what I want to talk about today with the onX features is while using the Hunt app, there's a layer that you can turn on called the wilderness layer. And what this layer does is it's able to show you any designated wilderness areas, and they usually have unique rules and regulations. So basically this layer details private, federal, state, and tribal wilderness areas, as well as federal wilderness studies areas. And what that does is shows you ahead of time to look into the specific rules and regulations within these regions. And for the most part, that normally means that there's no motorized access, and there's basically some of the deepest, darkest country that you can get into. So the wilderness layers is something that if you're looking for, a true, as the name says, wilderness experience and get really back into some areas, this might be something you want to look at. So with the wilderness features, you can turn that on and off at any time within the app to show an overlay with some dotted lines to be able to show you the outline and the curvatures of that wilderness area. So if you want to check out the onX Hunt app, you can use the promo code EMW at checkout. That'll save yourself 20% off of the Hunt app. Also, the University of Elk Hunting. So Corey Jacobson and Elk 101 have put together the most fully comprehensive elk hunting course available. From beginners to experts, anyone can learn from this online course. But one of the things that's not advertised a whole lot with it is the benefits that you get with, you can get discounts through companies like Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls, through the Elk 101 store, which has basically all gear available. And you get 15% off of the store, the Elk 101 store, so you're getting a better deal than just about anywhere else. And it's pretty nice to be able to have that extra feature. So with a few gear purchases, it pays for the course in itself in 1 year. So check out the University of Elk Hunting. Use the code EastMeetsWest at checkout. Save yourself $20 on the online membership. Maven Optics. So Maven has come out with the highest quality optics available with their binoculars, rifle scopes, spotting scopes, and they're able to do that at half the price of their competitors through their direct-to-consumer business model. And Maven is very highly customer service based company, and they take pride in their products and being able to serve you, the customer. So that's why when I originally bought Maven Optics years ago now, when I purchased them, that was the reason. I like supporting companies that have strong customer service and great warranties. And like I said, not to mention there's just some great people behind the company. So if you choose to buy some Maven Optics, use the code EastMeetsWest-gift at checkout. Get yourself a free gift with any full price optics order. All right, so to kind of get in the intro here of the podcast, I am releasing this one, the second one this week. Once again, just have so many good podcasts that I've recorded with some great guests, and most of them are pretty timely as far as releasing them later in the year would be less relevant as they are right now. So if that means I have to record more to fill in the spots later on, I'll do that. But so I've been putting a lot of work into trying to get these out here along with some extra content. I should have a food list up. Actually, this is going to hold me accountable by saying this as I'm recording it, a day ahead of time to get my food list done and updated on the website. You can check that out. Breakdowns of the food, your calories, the calories from fat, protein content, carbohydrates. I broke it down very detailed, and you can check out my gear list there and all the products available. I'll have that over on the East Meets West Hunt.com journal page. So check that out and we can go from there. If you're looking to pick up a new maybe you want a new hat or something for hunting season, or just wearing around camp, traveling, anything like that, definitely check out our website, as all of our apparel items, 3% of those sales go to a conservation organization. And right now, the two that we're supporting throughout for these sales is Backcountry Hunters and Anglers and QDMA, the Quality Deer Management Association. So if you look under each specific item, you can see which I guess organization that the money is going towards. So check that out online. I'd highly recommend taking a look at the Stealth Trucker multicam hats. That's the one I'll be wearing out west this year. And also we have some new mountain buck hats and just a variety of new hats and shirts that are out there. So check those out online at eastmeetswesthunt.com/shop. All right, without further ado, let's jump into the podcast here with Bill Vanderheyden from Iron Will Outfitters. All right, we're back for another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast, and I have on the line right now Bill Vanderheyden. Did I pronounce that right, Bill?
Vanderheyden.
Vanderheyden. I was close.
Hey, Bo, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. It's good to talk to you, Bill. It's been a few months since we've got the chat.
Yeah, it's been a busy summer for sure, but seasons are right around the corner here, so it's a good time to talk hunting.
Yes, it is. That's for sure. So, Bill, you're the owner and founder of Iron Will Outfitters, and if anyone listening to this podcast, we'll kind of dive into that in a little bit. But what I wanted to start off was giving a little bit of a background on yourself here, and what kind of got you to the point you're at today.
Yeah, so I grew up in Wisconsin hunting whitetails, bow hunting primarily, although some rifle hunting too. My dad and grandpa were bow hunters, so and most of my friends were back there too. It was a really high number of deer hunters in that area. So spent a lot of years bow hunting. Whitetails was really a passion back then. And about 20 years ago, I moved to Colorado. So I had 15 or so years of bow hunting whitetails, was pretty successful at it. And then, had a chance to move to Colorado for a job, and I was pretty excited to get out to the mountains and try elk hunting. And yeah, so that was 20 years ago. And since then I've been, bow hunting for elk has really become a passion of mine. It was right away. And I do a lot of that. I hunt mule deer as well. This year I got a pronghorn tag and a mountain goat tag, and I'll go back and hunt. I typically go back and hunt whitetails as well. But yeah, I grew up a whitetail hunter, but made the transition to out west elk hunting, and it's a lot different. I struggled for a while there, and I actually made a bad shot on an elk and had a broadhead fail, and that's what got me into really developing my own broadhead to make something that was a little more worthy for elk. But so that's a little bit of background.
Yeah. So what was that learning curve like? I mean, I know a little bit from, my experience at doing it, but, once you moved out there and everything else and were full force into elk hunting, what were some of those things that you ran into that, either you were doing, incorrectly or, something that just took a little bit to learn?
Yeah. So it was difficult start for me. After I was to the point where on whitetail I could, target a big buck and, figure him out and, take that buck. And I was really having a lot of success there. And then coming out elk hunting, started working for a company out here, and surprisingly, nobody at the company really bow hunted for elk. So I was hoping to get a little information from somebody, but couldn't get any. So I just started heading out of the mountains and hunting. So I kind of learned everything, myself from scratch. And back 20 years ago, there just wasn't the amount of information, at least not that I knew of, or where to find it, I guess. So, some of the things off the top of my head that were big problems for me is that, elk move a lot. And just because you found sign of where some elk were, a couple of weeks ago, I'm used to with a whitetail, the ranges are closer, shorter. If you have, good sign, trails, whatever, a lot of times you can just set up on them and sit there enough days and you're going to get some deer to come by. But elk, just because you had good sign from a week or two back, they might be miles away. So, you really got to move and find the elk. So I spent some time doing that. Hunting elk when they're not there isn't any good. So definitely, and I would plan this trip where I'd plan to backpack into a spot and set up my main camp and hunt around that area. And that's not always a good plan. If the elk aren't there, you got to go find them. So that's one advice I'd give is, put on the miles until you're seeing elk, hearing, smelling, or you got super fresh, droppings or something. Make sure the elk are in your area and, put on the miles until you find them. Because if you just pick up a spot that's a nice place to camp, that might be all you're doing is just enjoying your camp.
Yeah, and you can do that all summer, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I mean, I've heard it so much more now and kind of learned a little bit in my limited experience, and is, I that's the first thing I always thought you're supposed to do is just, backpack into an area and set up camp, and that's where you hunted for the week. And I, quickly learned that can really limit you. One, if you're going to go back in and you're willing to move around and, haul your camp around different places, that's, one thing. But if you're planning on hunting out of that same camp or that same, ridge, and the elk aren't there, or maybe you bump them out, then it can be detrimental to the rest of your trip. So with me, I guess I've been taking actually a lot of the truck camping style and being able to bounce around to more areas has been kind of the philosophy that I've taken most recently.
Yeah, that's not a bad way to go, but it's just some way to be mobile. Often I backpack into an area that I expect them to be at, and if it kind of varies, but a lot of times we'll just do one-man tents and be real mobile to be able to move in further or come out if needed. But yeah, have a way that if you find the elk, a few miles away, that you can, relocate to them, or if you just can't find them anywhere in there, you might have to move, many miles to find them.
Yeah. Do you typically like the backpack style hunting over like a truck camping or day hunting?
I do. Generally, I don't like seeing people when I hunt, so I like to get into remote, pretty remote, pretty far back in, and that could be a problem if you're, it's become more of a problem that further back in may not mean less people. I've been hunting these high basins a lot, and at least on the opener. And it used to be we never saw anybody in these spots, and more, that's where guys want to be, up on the ridges and the high basins, scoping things out. A lot of Google Earth hunters might even see elk in these basins on Google Earth, and we had a couple guys last year that's why they were in there. They saw the elk in there on Google Earth. So
that's funny.
Yeah, further back isn't always the best. Anymore, it's good to be flexible. A lot of times they're pushed out of those high basins pretty quickly, and then you got to figure out, well, where do they go once they get pushed.
Mm-hmm. What do you typically find as far as with that when you say you bump them out or someone else did? Do they typically have certain terrain or pockets or kind of nasty holes they like to go into, or what do you typically find with that?
They do, and it's, I've hunted this one area several years, well, like 10, 12 years now. So I don't hunt just one spot, but it's probably a 20-mile stretch of public land that I've hunted different parts in it. And so now I kind of know if they're not in one basin, check the next couple basins over. And if they've been pushed, then I've found kind of some of these thick nasty, heavily timbered spots that are hard to get to, where they'll often end up, second or third week a season. You can kind of count on them being there. They're harder to hunt. You can't see them. If you're bugling and talking, it can be great. And the spot that ended up last year was just so thick and nasty. It was hard to get a shot at him. I was getting in bow range on these nice bulls, but was struggling to get shots. And that's another thing that was really different about whitetail hunting is, with whitetails, I wouldn't be very aggressive in terms of, if I saw a whitetail, say 100 yards away in the woods, I wouldn't like sneak over there and try and shoot them. You typically are just setting up in a tree stand. If you see the deer, you're not moving at all. You're just hoping that he comes close enough for a shot. At least that's kind of the way I was. I would never really think about, I'd be too worried about scaring something away. And elk hunting, you need to kind of be aggressive. If you hear a bull bugling, when I first would say be elk hunting, and if I would call a couple times and hear a bull bugle, I'd be like, oh man, here he comes, he's coming in, and like, just get ready for a shot. And what I found out is most times they're not coming in. They might just be bugling back at your call, or you might just hear them bugling out there, and go after them. You can be pretty aggressive until you're that last maybe 100 yards or so. But I know a lot of people that have been out hunting. They heard a bull bugling, and they were set up on water, or just set up in a good place to shoot, and just expected them to come by. And if I hear one bugling, I'm going after it. When I get in, I'm pretty, almost all the time, if you get the wind right, I can see them before they see me, as long as I slow down that last 100 yards or so. But get right in there and get the shot, because if they start walking and start moving, they can cover a lot of ground in a short time. And so, what I found in the early years is I'd have a lot of elk encounters, but not a lot of success there. Either I would see them and not be aggressive enough moving in on them to get a shot, or I'd be moving along through the woods, and I just happen upon an elk, and it would be like, I'd happen upon a bull, and it'd be kind of overwhelming, like, there's this big elk here. And I wouldn't kind of be ready to, I had to kind of tell myself later, if you see an elk, draw, aim, and shoot. It's better to have a little movement and get that shot off, even if you gotta, go 10 feet to get in an opening and draw. You just have a little bit more time there with an elk, especially a big bull that's, say he's in the rut and he's all worked up. You can get by with some noise, some movement, be aggressive, get that shot.
Yeah. I mean, what you described there is, a lot of the situations that I've screwed up on with that. And it's funny, like you're talking about those dark, timbered, nasty, holes. That's, I can remember, a few years ago that I was finding bulls in this one spot, and I had them as close as 13 yards and couldn't get a shot because it was so thick, and blowdowns and everything. And looking back, I mean, I got a lot more aggressive by even my second year going into it, but I wasn't aggressive enough with like when it came down to the shot process. And, I got into position, but when I would see him coming and I'm realizing that I should be moved over just a little bit, I didn't do anything about it. And, that, maybe that would have worked, maybe it didn't, but it's, it's easy to, look back, hindsight, but they don't give you a whole lot of time or leniency as far as when they have that opening for the shot. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think I had that mindset from whitetail hunting, is like when I saw that whitetail and it, if I could see his eyes, he could see me, I would freeze and wait for him to move into a position where I could, draw my bow, take the shot, things like that. And so that was my first reaction, was freeze, when there's a bull elk standing there. And sometimes I'd freeze and wait and be, waiting for the right situation to draw and shoot. And then he would take off, and then I would be like, why didn't I just shoot that thing? So I think definitely have it in your, think through it in your head that when you're, if you got a big screaming bull coming in, it's pretty easy to get, buck fever and do the wrong thing there. So think through that scenario in your head, practice when you're shooting, out in the range or shooting 3D course. All right, this is a big bull just stepped in, what am I going to do? Think through it. So you're quickly drawing, aiming, taking the shot, moving to the position needed to make the shot, be prepared for that, excitement when that bull shows up close.
Yeah. It's one thing that's always helped me with, even with whitetails, was shooting an actual 3D target and then kind of visualizing it. I know it's not, the same situation, but kind of going through that visualization. And then once you see that and kind of setting up the target a little bit, different angles and just kind of, going through that in my head. So this year I picked up one of those solo targets of a big elk. It's like a 2D target that you basically pin on the front of your other target, and it's literally the size of an elk and everything else, and I love shooting that. It's it's the visualization and everything else with it, and I find that and when you shoot it, you can kind of see where the vitals are, and I've been trying to study the anatomy of it and everything else, and I'm hoping that helps out a little bit with that when it comes to this year hunting them.
Yeah, that's what I found is you kind of need to have your plan before that happens. Decide, all right, what shot angles am I going to take? Am I going to take a frontal or not? Am I just going to shoot a broadside? Think through the scenarios, have it planned in your head, because when that moment arises, you don't have a lot of time to think, and often it's exciting, and it's hard to think. It's hard to think through everything in that short time. So have a plan. And one thing I found is that with altitude, it makes it worse. And I know what I found is when I started hunting the high country, I was camping at this typical camp I was going to. It's about 11,300 feet. And the first day or two, I would have some effect from altitude. And for me, it was really just, I kind of lose critical thinking where I just, I had opportunities on bulls that first day or so. I'm like, what was I thinking? Why didn't I do this or why didn't I do that? And I realized that I kind of was losing a little bit of the critical thinking with that high altitude. And that's one effect of altitude is you don't think so straight compared to being a little lower. I found that if I camp at below 10,000, I just have no effect. Or a lot of times I camp at 10 or 10.5. But if I'm up at 11, just a little bit lightheaded, just a little bit out of it that first day or two, and then I kind of adjust to it. But I was finding that it was having a little effect on me that I wasn't realizing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, definitely altitude with me, it affects, it seems like everything, but and sometimes I don't notice it as much at first, but then, as the day goes on in the first couple of days there, I'm wore out and I'm tired, and I just, like, in my head just feels like it hurts. and definitely, goes along with, thinking and everything else, decision making, stuff like that. So, I'm sure with, when you're practicing those, scenarios and you might encounter, that helps, similar to when you're practicing, shooting, under pressure or anything else, whether that's a 3D tournament or something similar to that can, directly correlate over to when you're under pressure, kind of doing it out of, habit of it.
Yeah, for sure. And, another thing is, calling. I went to some seminars, heard some different people talk on calling, and then for a while there I was fairly aggressive on setting up and calling, and really I call less and less every year. And it depends on what type of hunting you want to do, but often I want to go into an area, figure out if the elk are there or not, figure out what they're doing, without even making a call. I just think you're just alerting them that something's there. Maybe it's an elk, maybe it's a hunter or whatever. And you're always risking when you're calling as you're going that you could be blowing something out. It could hear you, get nervous, just move out of there. I like to go in and figure out what's going on with the elk first. And that's assuming I have some time to hunt. If I'm there for a week, I'll go in, hopefully figure out if there's elk or not there in day one. If there are, if you're not aggressive, you can, let's say they're going into an open basin and you can see them moving up into the open to feed and moving down into the timber. You might be able to hunt those same elk for multiple days, keeping the wind right, get in for a shot, and even take an elk and not blow them out. Whereas if you're aggressively calling, it's either going to happen right then or it's not, and often it's not. And people are going to have different opinions on this. And if I more have like 2 days to hunt, I need to get something done, then I'm probably covering miles, bugling to locate things, moving in on them, and being super aggressive, not caring if I blow them out. I'll just hike a couple miles to the next, elk kind of a thing. But in general, I think a lot of guys are just going in and calling too much. And if, you're kind of pushing the elk to do something. Often, if you're calling and being aggressive, you're kind of pushing them to either come in or leave. And a lot of times they're going to leave. So it's, for a lot of guys, I'd recommend, don't call without some purpose to it.
Mm-hmm. So with your strategy, with that being said, when you're going to locate them, are you relying on looking through glass a lot of times, or are you waiting to, hear them bugle, find fresh sign, or what's kind of your strategy with that?
Yeah, and it kind of depends on the part of the season and where they're at. A lot of times, the area I hunt in in a couple of weeks here when season opens, it's been really warm. They're going to be up really high, and there's a lot of, above timberline even, there's a lot of places where you can spot them. So in those I'm going to be, first light, I'm going to be at a place where I can see a ways, and good chance I'll be able to spot some or keep moving through over the next ridge until I can, spot something. And because that's open area where you can see them. If it's more areas where you can't see them, then it's, getting the wind right, moving, looking for fresh sign, or even elk. But, it's, it kind of depends on the terrain, but a lot of times it is looking for elk themselves if it's open enough to see them. Otherwise, looking for fresh sign, checking the water sources, springs, wallows, things like that, see if they've been getting hit.
Okay. That's kind of what I was wondering there. And as far as as the season goes on, you said it seems like they kind of are, from pressure and everything, more in that dark timber rather than, still coming out in some of those meadows or the high basins.
Yeah, this is over the counter area in Colorado, so that's the case there. It's going to vary by what you're hunting and how much pressure there is, but that's what I've seen after that first week, unless it's a really remote place that nobody's found, and I don't know of any of those anymore. A lot of times those open basins are only good for a few days, and then the elk are pushed out. Sometimes they'll move from one basin to the next, but a lot of times they get wise to it and they're not out in the open very much after that.
Okay. That's some good information there, and like some of the I've hunted over the counter in Colorado, and it was high country type stuff like that, and I had some intel from people, showing opening day and even a couple of days before season, all these elk up in the high country and everything, and I went as early as the beginning of the second week and didn't see that at all. I might see one pass through just above timberline, but not, actually going out from like a feed to bed pattern in daylight anyways.
Yeah, my experience has been after the first week, or even, a lot of times even after the first few days or so, depending on how much pressure there is in your area. But they're not above tree line in the open basins. They're in some cover and some timber, and they're moving around as there's pressure in those. And that's why a lot of times, even if they were in a spot a week ago, they might not be there now. So that's when often you got to put on some miles and find them. And in Colorado, starting that second week into the third week is when there's just more bugling activity going on. And then, ideally you're hearing them, being able to move in on them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a perfect situation, in my opinion, is get a bull worked up that he's just bugling by himself without me doing anything, and I just sneak in on him and put an arrow in him. I mean, that's kind of best case, and that's often why that, a couple weeks into season can be better. They're in the dark timber. They kind of got to be talking to find them. Unless you're just pretty good at figuring out where they're going to be at and sneaking in on them. And I'm not opposed to calling either. I'm just saying that when you're calling, you're often pressuring them to do something, and so it's not my first thing to do when I go into an area. But if I kind of know they're in the timber, I don't know if they're in this basin or the next one, I might be hitting the ridges before first light, even maybe an hour before, and throwing out a locating bugle and just figuring out where they're at. And trying to get a position to move on them at first light when they're still up and around feeding.
Yeah, it's interesting, with I'm sure a lot of it comes down to hunting pressure and stuff, but when you're laying in your tent at night, especially if like when I backpack into an area, you can hear them bugling all through the night, and then it's just like silence, once the daylight comes. So I guess, going in even an hour before like that, locating them can really be beneficial for, giving you an idea of what direction to head.
Yeah, it can. And, a couple of years ago, I had them going by my tent at 3 a.m. bugling, and I got dressed and went out and followed them. So it's because that's what they were doing. They were bugling up until an hour before light and then stopping. And then I was having trouble finding them. So I followed them far enough back, but I figured out where they were going and bedding. And it was down in this steep, deep, dark timber. But that's how I had to figure it out that time. It was an odd year. They were getting a lot of pressure. And it varies where I go. For many years, I never saw anybody, and then some years there's a couple groups in there, and then sometimes not. So it's good to be able to have a plan B or C if there's guys in your area or the elk just aren't there. Be ready to move and go find some elk.
Yeah. So when you were saying earlier about you made a shot on a bull, and the broadhead had failed with you, and that kind of was your start to, coming up with Iron Will and everything. So how long ago was that?
Yeah, that was in 2004. So that was, I think it was my fourth year bow hunting for elk. It was, as I said, I made a lot of mistakes early on. It took me a while to get things figured out enough just to get in there for a shot. And so, my fourth year elk hunting, worked really hard to get that shot opportunity, nice bull, broadside shot. I just shot a little bit forward and hit the shoulder blade. I think it hit the back edge of the shoulder blade and just got very little penetration. It appeared that broadhead just failed on that. And I spent the week looking for that bull and was just really devastated by it. And so that's one of the things I learned too, is that, man, those elk are so much bigger than a whitetail. And looking at the broadhead, with a critical kind of mechanical engineering approach, after that I could see all this potential failure to it, and was really kicking myself for not for not choosing a better broadhead, at the time. And so I spent a couple of years where I was buying a lot of broadheads. I was reading the research out there, the testing that had been done, and testing a lot of broadheads myself. I was shooting through, elk shoulder blades, in different materials as well. And after a couple of years, I kind of, I learned a few things, like a durable 2-blade head was far out penetrating, like a chisel point three blade head, which is kind of what I'd been typically using up until then. But then I also found that there was something I didn't quite like about every one. It had some kind of weak point to them. So that's where I started designing my own broadheads. I was a mechanical engineer doing product development for a company already. And so designing components, mechanisms, doing the analysis, the prototype testing was what I did in my day job every day. And so I was just applying that then to broadheads. So I would design a broadhead, get it built. Brothers and friends used them that year. We'd get all the results, and then I was doing a lot of testing on the side, just penetration testing, things like that. And we'd see where were the weak points and iterate on the design and do another one the following year. And spent about 7 years doing that, really, before I came up with the final design. And it was really, this whole time, it was really just for myself, my friends, and family to have just the ultimate broadhead. And I was really going for max penetration on elk, to be able to get through that shoulder blade and then go through the vitals, get a pass-through shot, stay sharp through there, and get a quick kill rather than have that, terrible failure when you hit a shoulder blade. That was really my goal. And yeah, I feel like I really achieved that with our design. I've had over 30 guys, I think, now tell me they've got a pass-through on an elk, including one or both shoulder blades. So that's great. That's really what I was trying to do there.
Yeah. Okay. And so what made you decide that, like, all right, I can take this idea and these things that I'm, building for friends and family to be able to, turn that into a business? Yeah.
So I really wasn't too interested in doing that. I had a good engineering job. I really enjoy the design, analysis, product testing, but I was not a sales marketing guy at all. So I didn't, I didn't really plan to go forward with it for that reason. And then I met this guy, Eric Whiting, up in the mountains. We were both actually in this backcountry basin in a wilderness area, hunting. And, at first I wasn't happy that he was in my spot, but we ended up becoming friends. And then a couple years later, we actually hunted together, and we took 2 bulls in back 7 miles in, and helped each other with the pack outs, which were brutal, but it kind of solidified our friendship. And then he saw me take 2 elk with that broadhead, and one of the elk was a 54-yard shot, complete pass through, went 10 yards and stuck in the dirt past it. The broadhead was still sharp. I could shave hair with it. I put it right back in my quiver, and I shot a big bull with it later. And after he saw that, he thought, man, you really should take that to market. And I knew he had a marketing background. That's what he'd been doing. He was a younger guy. And, I just said, hey, if you want to take the sales and marketing side of this on, let's do it. And so that was it. We co-founded the company. We spent quite a bit of time getting it off the ground, and Eric, he then, after 2 years of no paychecks and lots of work, he has some good work opportunities that he decided to go after in marketing. So he's not an owner of the company anymore, but he still helps me out. We still hunt together. Still a really good guy. But really, that's why it came to market. Is I had somebody that knew the sales marketing side of it and kind of prodded me that, hey, this is an awesome product. People will want this. And, I did feel like I agreed. I think it was just a step up from what anybody's used to on durability and penetration. Just spent a lot of time, went through 5 different blade steels, spent a lot of time on the heat treat process. Our sharpening, we got probably 10x better in sharpness over the years. so I really felt confident. Yeah, this could help a lot of people, and decided to leave my corporate job and launch the company.
Okay, so there wasn't like a transitional period for you where you were doing both. You just kind of went all in.
It was, I started it before I left my full-time job, but then I had so when I left my full-time job, I still had some side jobs kind of to do. And really I kept on to those for a while just to pay the bills through the time when the company wasn't paying the bills. But so it's been my full-time job for 2.5 years, but I had a few side jobs until recently. I don't need to do those anymore.
Well, that's great. I always like hearing that side of it and how kind of the business, of a small company, grows and does that. So that's interesting. And since I got to meet Eric back in January and have, had a relationship with him ever since, and he seems like a really great guy from the marketing sales side of things.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I'm really, really thankful. He co-founded the company with me. He's for a marketing guy, he's honest as the day is long, and he is really really a good guy. So yeah, he helps me with marketing still. And we're planning to hunt together here in a couple of weeks. So really good guy for sure.
Oh, that's great. So with your broadhead, so you were talking a little bit, about the sharpness and the steel and everything, but what are some of the other features that really, stand out and make your head, kind of different from some of the other ones that they have on the market?
Yeah, so our blade material is an A2 tool steel, and so A2 is a steel used for metal stamping dies and punches. It's used to cut other metals. So it's unique in that it can have a very sharp edge and excellent edge retention, along with very high impact toughness. So that's one thing that's kind of unique about broadhead blades. There's a lot of good knife steels out there, because knife blades, they just don't have that high speed impacts going on. So steels that work well there just don't work quite as well for broadheads. So that's the reason for tool steel. And 90+% of the broadheads out there are just using a 420 stainless steel for the broadhead blades, and that's a pretty low end blade steel. If you talk to a custom knife maker, they wouldn't really even consider 420 a blade steel. They would want something that you could achieve a higher hardness to it. But it's very low cost. You can get a decent edge on it and have a decent kind of impact toughness, but it's really nowhere near what you can achieve with the premium blade steel. Typical hardness on 420 stainless steel is going to be in that 50 Rockwell C range, and what hardness gives you is so hardness is a measure of hardness will correlate to the kind of the compressive strength at the surface. It's measured by denting in that surface and seeing how far you dent with a certain force. The reason that's important is in a knife blade is that having that high hardness, you can grind it and hone it to a much finer edge because it has that strength to it that you can have that very fine edge. And then high hardness will make it take a long time to wear away that edge. So a typical broadhead blade, once you get through the hide, often it's pretty dull. And if you go through the hide in a rib, there's no edge left really. And so when it's pushing through the animal, it's tearing instead of slicing. And I'm not saying you can't kill an animal with that. You certainly can. But with what I wanted is a broadhead that would go through hide, rib, even a shoulder blade, and keep that razor sharp edge and slice all the way through, give you that exit hole. And then by slicing all the way through, broadheads kill by bleeding. So you really want to have as much slicing, bleeding as you can. So by slicing all the way through, much quicker kills, often they're dead in sight, and then you get that exit hole for a good blood trail. So the blade steel it's it's a premium blade steel where most broadheads you're just not going to get that. And it's a very high impact blade steel. So even if you hit, say, a leg bone or some heavy bone impact, it's not going to break where most blades will. Mm-hmm. Especially other premium steels that are stainless steel, like 440C or S30V, 154CM. I've prototype tested a number of those steels, and you can get a great edge with them, but they just don't hold up to heavy bone impact with those. And so that's kind of the blade material. And then on the ferrule material, a lot of ferrule materials out there are 70-75 aluminum or 303 stainless. What I found with aluminum is that if you're hitting bone, with bone impact, they're typically bending. They're breaking, but most of the time they're at least bending. So you're losing energy. You're kind of redirecting that broadhead. You're not going to get the penetration. And if they bend all the way over and break, then you're really not getting much penetration at all. And so even 303 stainless isn't that much stronger compared to like a hardened stainless steel. So anyway, we use a grade 5 titanium that has a great strength to weight ratio in our lighter broadheads, and we use a hardened stainless steel in our heavier broadheads to really have that high strength to the ferrule and maintain that, don't bend, keep that energy driving through the animal for max penetration.
Okay. And what's funny, like when so for the listeners, I have been shooting iron wills now. This will be my second year. And when I first, got them, my whole family's big into archery hunting, and I was showing them the heads and everything. And my uncle's a machinist, so he recognized the A2, and he couldn't believe that, that was being used in a broadhead. And he explained to me kind of the similar, the, I guess, components of it and why, some of the stuff with it and how hard it is and the edge retention and all that stuff. And it was really interesting to me. And I'm, with that being said, I'm guessing, or maybe I'm wrong, but that, other companies may have not, looked into that was because they were trying to hit a certain price point. And when you try to hit a certain price point, you sacrifice the quality and durability of it.
Yeah, for sure. I think most other manufacturers are selling into retail, and then there's some big, selling into retail. There's some big markups through that, and so if you're selling a 3-pack for $30 or $40, you really only have a couple of dollars to put into the whole materials manufacturing processes. And I don't blame manufacturers. That's just kind of the model that's evolved over the years and what most hunters expect. They expect to pay $10 or so for a broadhead, and in general, I think people have been okay with them being I shoot it once and it's damaged, it's bent or broken, and I think that's just been the mindset. And the problem I see with that is that, well, when did that thing bend or break? Did it even make it through the rib before that happened, or shoulder blade edge or whatever? I want something that's going to go all the way through there and not bend or break and stay strong. And so I've never, like I said, I was planning to make this for me, and I just wanted to have the ultimate broadhead. So I went through and picked, I went through 5 different steels until I found the one that I felt really was doing the best job for that really sharp edge and edge retention along with impact toughness. And then I spent a lot of time on the heat treat process, the sharpening process. And so our process steps are very long and involved and expensive. And if there wasn't, if the lead engineer wasn't running the company, it wouldn't be going this way, Yeah. I can tell you from working at many other companies doing product development for 25 years, I'd often come to the table with, okay, this is the best material, best design, best process to have the ultimate product. And I was always pushed back on, well, what about this lower cost option here? We know it's not quite as good, but we'll make more money. And it was always a struggle to try and get product improvements through marketing, sales, upper management. And that's something I always wanted to do when I had my own, my own products, my own company, is all the decisions are made based on maximum performance. And then I'm pricing it where I just need to have the company, keep going on, be successful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny, and it's probably a good thing that you did that, just, without the plan of it being a company. So, I mean, I know with your engineering mind, you may not have, went to try to take shortcuts if this was going to be, a company from the beginning. But when you're doing it just for yourself, like you said, you want the best of, everything to make that ultimate broadhead, and that's, is what, was the end result with it. And I think that's, it's funny. Like I said, I had experiences with it. So I shot 2 animals with the S25 broadheads last year from Iron Will. And the first one, I shot a turkey on the ground that went through the turkey and into a giant pine tree and penetrated about 3 inches into the pine tree after passing through the turkey. And I had to literally cut the broadhead out and to be able to get it. And then the second one, I went right through the leg bone of a doe in late season, and it was extremely impressive. Literally snapped the leg right in half. And it wasn't the absolute perfect shot, but when you're off by a few inches, that can happen. And that it was just extremely impressive. And that's why, whether it's whitetail or elk, why I chose to, want to shoot a head like this. I've had, the stories. I only ever used expandable broadheads for 1 year and had it fail. But then, and even with other fixed blades, I like you said, like what most people do is, I knew as soon as I shot them once an animal, they were done. Like I was never going to use that head again. And they kind of just went in a box, and that was it. And I got more. But with these, the ones I shot last year, they're in my quiver still. And the only one that I damaged at all was because I hit it with another iron will, and I dented the one piece of it, and that was it. And today I was talking to you, Bill, on the phone before we started recording. I was shooting my heads, and I didn't tell you this part, but the first group that I had, I normally don't shoot 2 at the same spot because of this reason, but I shot 2 and I'm like, wow, that was a great group, and I went up and I'm like, I'm lucky I didn't cut, any of my fletchings. Went back and moved back another 10 yards and went to shoot again, and the second arrow just went flying, just dropped right out of the air. Well, apparently I cut 2 of the fletchings and never even knew it, and they blew off as soon as I shot. So it was just it was funny to see that. But the heads, and I'm going to kind of steal your thunder here a little bit, but with when it comes to shooting with a well-tuned bow, they fly like a field point. It's pretty amazing. I'm still doing a little bit just micro tuning with my bow. Currently at the time of recording this is, beginning of August, or I guess closer to the middle of August now. But it last year, when I had it on my bow last year, it was my effective range was 70 yards, and you couldn't tell if I screwed on a field point or a broadhead, and it still hit the same spot.
Nice. Yeah, that was another thing. As I said, originally I was going for max penetration on elk, but I also do a lot of mule deer hunting as well. And it just seems like my typical shot on mule deer has been that 50 to 65 yard range. And so another goal throughout this development process was to have something that would shoot well at that distance. And over the years, my broadhead blade, it got shorter, so it got a little more compact, and it's got a Tonto tip, so that there's a second angle at the tip, and what that does is increases the strength of the tip, but it also makes it shorter overall length, so you have less planing from that. And I did computer modeling of the flow over the broadhead too, to try and reduce the drag, computational fluid dynamics modeling, and I really feel like the in the end, the broadhead we got, it's a great flying long range head. I shoot daily with targets out to 100 yards, and they hit right with field points for me. With a little tuning to your bow, I think they're gonna shoot well for most people.
Yeah, and that's like with me. I mean, I was struggling with target panic for most of the summer, so I was just blank bill shooting, and it took me until a month ago to actually start shooting targets again. So I'm behind where I normally am with shooting broadheads, but finally, got around to it, and I hadn't made any adjustments other than, when I just originally paper tuned my bow to it, and they're just shooting a little bit to the right, and that's just going to take a little bit of, micro adjusting my rest, and it should pull them right back in a matter of minutes and be ready to go.
Sounds good. Yeah, you were mentioning hunting turkeys and deer, and they're definitely overkill for turkeys.
Yeah.
And, a lot of guys ask me, aren't these overkill for whitetail? And I mean, yeah, they are, but I mean, to me, there kind of is no overkill. What it does for you is it opens up shot opportunities. What happens if you're shoot a little far forward and hit that leg bone or hit that shoulder bone or knuckle? This broadhead's probably going to get through those and get to the vitals for you. Or if you got a straight down shot and you go into the spine. We've had a number of guys pass right through the spine, actually sever it in two. Tony Treach's mule deer buck last year in Colorado, it was over a 200-inch buck. He shot straight down off a cliff into it and severed the backbone in two and went down into the vitals and killed it. And, a mechanical or a lesser broadhead that would have bent or broken, he might have lost that buck, So I think, yeah, they're kind of overkill, but then it opens up shot opportunities for you. I've taken my last two mule deer have been frontal shots, and in that case, I like having the margins for error. If they move a little bit and you hit that shoulder blade, I mean, I know it's going to go through there with my setup. So I just feel like it gives you a margin for error when things don't go perfectly.
Yeah, and then they don't always go perfectly no matter how good of a shot you are. The animals can move or, whatever the situations that's thrown at you. I know so going back to the whitetail thing, my dad does a lot of ground hunting and kind of still hunting, and he'll, during the rut, he'll move through these clear cuts and, get aggressive with calling. And he shot, a bunch of bucks frontal on the ground, going through. And that's where a broadhead like that and would have that max penetration to go all the way through that cavity and, essentially come out the back leg, Yep.
Yeah, that's what my last two mule deer have been, just like that, where one was a straight frontal and it came out, near the back leg, and another one was a slight quartering on, and I actually ended up placing it right through the shoulder blade, but it got a full pass through, came out just in front of the hind leg there, and it was a quick kill. So, I mean, I hesitate a bit to recommend that shot to people. I think you need to understand, I've got a 70-pound bow, a 30-inch draw, 500-grain arrow. You have to have the right setup for it. But I think on a whitetail-sized animal, it's going through.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And like you said, if not everything, is going to be perfect. So like for me, that was the, determining factor with it is I want to have the best opportunity possible at that. And for me to do that, I want to make sure my broadhead isn't going to fail, for any situation with it. I try to, my arrow, I think it weighs 486 grains, and I'm shooting a 70-pound bow with only a 27.5-inch draw, so mine's a little bit shorter. But even with that, my bow's not extremely fast, but it just out-penetrates, like it penetrates great. And that's what I want. That's, most, out west it's a little bit different where I can have some longer shots, but, even for whitetails in, the east here or wherever you're hunting whitetails at and you're having a 15, 20 yard shot, I like having that, that margin for error being, a lot smaller with, worrying about your setup and everything with that.
Right. And, I like to aim kind of in that golden triangle. I like to aim forward, at that crease or a little bit ahead of that for whitetails or elk as well. I just know that they die a lot faster if you hit in there versus hitting back a bit. So, when I aim in that area, you're just close to bones. It doesn't have to move very much before you could touch one, and I like to be able to get right through them.
Yeah. So with the broadheads, that's kind of been the foundation of, when I first heard of Iron Will and everything, but you've added a little bit more here in the last few years, and the one specifically that comes to mind is your new knife, and I believe that's just released this year, right?
It is, yeah. I've been working on it for a couple of years, but I wanted to. So I do a lot of backcountry backpack hunting, and I wanted a really light knife that would hold an edge, get me all the way through an elk, skinning, quartering, deboning, even caping with just one knife. And what I was having trouble finding one that was both ultralight and a premium blade steel that would hold an edge really well. So, and I don't really like the replacement blades. I mean, it's nice to not have to sharpen anything and have it be sharp, but I've just, I've broken a couple, had a lot of friends cut themselves when they broke a blade, going around bones, things like that. And so to me, I like a little sturdier knife. So what I did is made a knife using the same A2 tool steel, the same heat treat, hardening, sharpening process we do for the broadheads in this ultralight knife. It just weighs 1 ounce, and it has a couple of top sharpened edges that are unique near the tip, and you can use those top edges to make all the hide cuts, drip the hide with that, and then use the belly of the knife to skin and debone, and that way the knife stays sharp a really long time. I've actually been able to do 2 animals without touching it up, but I think for most guys, they'll be able to get through, like completely through an elk with it, and for just 1 ounce, I think it's about the lightest option for being able to do that.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And with the, I've used replacement blades, for the last few years, and one of the biggest struggles I've seen with them is when a blade, gets dull or breaks, is trying to change out that blade too. I've cut myself just trying to, snap it out and put another one in.
Right.
And, then you're adding, you're having to bring extra blades and making sure you have those and, everything else. And, each has their, their positives and their negatives with it. But I just thought that was a really interesting design.
Yeah, it's, a lot of guys don't want to sharpen knives, and some guys are great at it and a lot of guys aren't. And so, I understand that. I was trying to make a knife where you could for sure get through an animal and not have to sharpen it in the backcountry. But we also sell this little carbide sharpener, and Aaron Snyder actually pushed me to come out with one of those. It's the right blade angle for both the broadhead blades and our new ultralight knife. And you just pull it through there, just light pressure, a number of strokes until you're shaving hair again, and it's really easy to use. So, and that only weighs a 1/2 ounce, so that's not a bad setup either, to have the ultralight knife and then a little carbide sharpener, and then you can get through multiple animals throughout the season with it that way.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and hopefully that's what something that everyone needs to run into is having to cut up multiple animals on a trip, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I know. I always have a couple tags if I can. So
yeah. I hear you there. So Bill, is there anything else that you want to talk about on Iron Will side of things?
The other new thing that we've come out with recently is some different components for the ends of the arrows. What I was seeing with doing a lot of impact testing on our broadheads, shooting through heavy bones, things like that occasionally you'd get the side impact to where it would start damaging the arrow, either bend components or break out of the carbon. And so for myself, I started making these 1-inch hardened steel sleeves that go over the end of the arrow to reinforce that. And I was just making them for myself for testing to make my arrows last longer. And enough guys saw them, wanted to me to make some for them, then I decided to just launch it as a product. So we call them impact collars, and it's a 1-inch hardened steel sleeve, and there's a little flange over the end, so it covers the end of your arrow and really reinforces it. And they're meant to be used with hit inserts, and you can use those on 204 diameter or 166 diameter arrows. So, Easton axis or injections, for instance. But there's also, you can use them in, the Black Eagle, the Gold Tip, TKOs. There's you can really use them in any of the 204, 166 diameter. So the reason we decided to make the hit inserts ourselves is, most of them out there are aluminum or brass. So it's kind of soft. If you take a hard impact, you can start damaging that insert and have it not spin true. And by having hardened steel, the threads are much stronger, 2 to 3 times stronger. And then you add that impact collar, 1-inch hardened steel sleeve over the end. Now you've greatly strengthened the end of that arrow, so that not only do you have a real strong broadhead, now you have a strong, connection system. And I like the hit insert because the shank of that broadhead then aligns directly to the ID of the arrow. So if you're buying, high quality arrow that spins true, at our broadhead that's aligned directly to that ID, you're pretty much guaranteed you're going to have a great spinning arrow broadhead combination then. And then you've kind of got this laminated, almost hardened steel, carbon fiber, hardened steel layers kind of bonding that, connecting that all together. I really like that system. I've been using that myself for years, and that's become really popular. We've just started selling that the last few months as well.
Yeah, my elk hunting partner picked that up, and he was showing me the components to it and everything, and he put them on his Easton Axis arrows, and has been really happy with them so far.
Yep, I have one set up that's Easton Axis and one that's carbon injection, and I've got some Black Eagles and Gold Tips and VAPs and everything here too that I'll be testing. But I was shooting Total Archery Challenge with that the 4mm system and with the hardened steel insert, hardened steel impact collar, and we make hardened steel field points now as well. I shot 3 different locations. I think I shot 10 rounds total, and I lost one arrow clean, but I didn't break any. Even though I missed a couple times, put one into the kind of the rocks and dirt, that system held up. So for 4mm arrow, that was impressive to me, is that I could hit some smaller rocks and rocks in the dirt and logs and things like that, and have the arrow survive. So
yeah, especially at Total Archery Challenge, which is the graveyard of arrows.
It is. There was thousands of arrows sacrificed on those weekends.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, yeah, like I said, I really like the components, and one of the other things, I don't know if you had mentioned it or not, but with the broadheads, and I'm not sure about your other components, but you offer a lifetime guarantee on those as well.
We do. Yep. If you bend or break anything, we'll replace it. So yep, there's a lifetime warranty on it. And we did that because really what I saw is shooting through bones, shooting through animals, it just doesn't damage it. With that hardened steel or titanium ferrule and that tool steel blade, it's going to make it through there without bending or breaking. And so, yeah, and even if you do shoot through there and hit a rock or something, we cover that as well in the warranty. And especially early on, it's a high price point. It's three broadheads for $99.95. It's a lot more than people are used to spending. And a majority of that is just our materials manufacturing processes. But to try and more justify that to people, we give a lifetime guarantee. And I think a lot of people are finding that it may actually be cheaper for them that way. We had one guy put one through 6 deer and is still using it. So, if you can reuse it over the years, it may save money over buying disposables.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And I found with my hunting gear is I'd rather, save a little money to be able to buy, a higher quality, more of a buy once, cry once kind of mentality. And that's That's been at least the way I've done it.
Yeah, my feeling with bow hunting is there's just so many things that can go wrong, especially like elk hunting in the backcountry. It's just so hard to get that shot opportunity. So many ways you can mess it up. I don't want the broadhead failure to be one of them. I want to, and $33 for a broadhead. It's a lot compared to what people are used to paying, but it's not a lot of money for what's on the line at that moment, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that, and I put so much time, and I know so many other people do, into that and preparing and all that stuff for that one opportunity. That's the last thing that I want to fail.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Bill, do you have anything else that you want to kind of leave the listeners with, or any last thoughts?
No, that's about it. If people are looking at elk hunting, I'd recommend. I guess one thing that I should mention is that, elk hunting, elk are just a bigger animal, thicker hide. Elk or moose, say, bigger animals, thicker hide, heavier bones. Consider stepping up your broadheads for that. And one thing that's important, mechanicals work fine for a lot of people on deer, and a lot of people use them for elk as well. But in the testing I've done, it takes a tremendous amount of force to open up those blades and push it through an elk hide or a moose hide. And so, what I found, it can be over 10 times as much force compared to a cut-on contact broadhead. And in deer, it probably doesn't matter. You maybe have enough energy to get through anyways, or maybe not. But on a deer and elk, I think getting that max penetration is important. And because halfway through an elk, just taking out one lung, it's not going to die. It's going to go a long ways. So it's probably not going to die that day, and you may not find it. So I think consider a durable cut-on contact broadhead for that situation, just to get that max penetration. And if people have questions about broadheads or setups, they can our website, ironwilloutfitters.com. There's a contact us form. Our phone number's on there. They can follow us on Instagram at Iron Will Outfitters, and fire away questions. We'll try and help you out.
Okay, great. Is there any other place that you can find information on Iron Will and anything else, whether it's social media, YouTube, anything like that?
Yeah, Instagram is probably a good way to contact us at Iron Will Outfitters is our Instagram page, and then you can see kind of our new products that come out and a lot of testimonials, things like that. There's a lot of information on our webpage, which is ironwilloutfitters.com, that has a lot of our material information, our different product information. So check that out. Go to our features page, and you can learn more about the steels, the materials used, and why, and stuff like that. Yeah, and then if you've got a more lengthy question that you want to get answered, just use the contact us form, and you can also call our website. I think it's extension 2. You have to listen to the message there for tech support. You'll leave a message, and somebody will call you back if you have questions there.
Great. Well, Bill, this has been a long time coming. We've been talking about doing this podcast since the day I started it, really. And we finally were able to link up and get this done. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, we've both been busy, but it's good to finally get it done and talk to you for a while.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Bill, will you have a great night and a great hunting season, and especially with that goat tag.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on, and good luck this year.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.